Welcome back, everybody. It's the next episode of the Fearless Business Podcast. I am your host, Robin Waite, the Fearless Business Coach. I have got an exceptional guest on the show this afternoon. So Sandra is an executive and transformational coach who works with broadcasters that want to grow, retain, and upskill their talent. She is best known as the Millennial Coach. That's DA, the Millennial Coach, and host of her own podcast, which we'll be talking about later on, called The Core. Welcome to the show, Sandra. A lot of coaches, I hate to say it, this is going to sound awful, but they're too busy chasing money to take the time to be really interested in the people that they're actually coaching. And I don't think that's just coaching. I think that's service client businesses in general, doing it for the wrong reasons.
The question I'm going to propose to you is the fact that they're chasing money, are they good at coaching? So maybe they're not coaches, they're just salesmen.
Basically.
And that's the problem. Is I feel frustrated with the industry in this country because I was talking to someone who's come on my show before, and she's an accountant. She owns her own company, works for herself. And we talk about, because we both have autoimmune syndrome. So we talk about working for yourself with an illness. She had somebody who was not making even a dime of profit for their business. And all of a sudden she was a finance coach after about 2-3 weeks. And so this is why it's important to do research. I have an MBA. I also have an MA in executive coaching. I also have a degree in journalism. I started my career off with Billboard magazine and CNN. So for me, I've had to go through the trenches. I've really had to work hard to get where I've gotten to. And it's when people say I'm a coach, and then you ask them about different techniques or methodologies. You might talk about well-formed questions. You might talk about, future pacing, anything like that. And somebody can't even give you a response to you talking about methodology. Then to me, the whole purpose of what you're doing, there's no foundation. And I think that's a disservice to the coachee. And I think that's a disservice to the craft and to people like you and me who are actually putting our best foot forward. And when we are teaching coaches, I'm very tough love as a coach, but with empathy. And the type of mentors that I use is Caroline Myss, Brené Brown, Byron Katie, and Iyanla Vanzant. And those four particular, and unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, but they are all women and they all speak my language. I do think John Maxwell's fantastic as well. And also Bob Proctor, he's quite fun. It's a case of taking best practice and creating your own practice that really stimulates the mindsets of your coachee. Because what happens if you're a good coach, and that particular lady in Leeds, she kept saying to me that question that you asked me, it just keeps going around in my head because it's now you've penetrated them. And one of the sayings that I have for my coaching business is, once you feel, you start to heal. I currently do some mentoring and coaching with African entrepreneurs. And one of them, she's in Ivory Coast and she has a library. And when we first started, she had no business plan. She had no strategy. She didn't even know. She knew she had limiting beliefs, but she wasn't sure what they were. I got an email that I read today that she's doing some of the worksheets from Byron Katie that I sent her on doing the work. Because as a coach, you've got to stay up to date, but you also need to make sure that your coaches get the most up-to-date methods in order to help them transform. She said lots of stuff is coming up for her and she's absolutely terrified and petrified, but in her terror, she has got the American embassy, Spanish embassy. She now has successful, famous authors who are interested in being part of her project. That's just us working for 2 months. And that's not that many sessions. When you see people transform, I've seen somebody go into a job, be in a job for, 13 years. I've worked with them for a couple of weeks and they now have a different position. They've had a position created for them in the organization. They now speak up. They don't have the fear that they had. And that's just because they started to see things from a different perspective. But if you can't do that as a coach, there's work for you to do. It's not the coach's fault that you're not a good coach. It's your fault. And one thing we don't do is a lot of people, this has nothing to do with coaching, this is humanity. We don't own our shit. We don't take ownership of the things that we do wrong. We like to spend time, blaming others. And the one thing I will never do, if I make a mistake, I will always own it.
Same here, 100%. And again, like that was me when I, offered that refund to that client. That was me saying, best will in the world, ultimately, we're not going to be able to get the result here. And as a coach, when I just started out again 5 years ago, you always have that sort of bit of imposter syndrome floating around there. I call myself a business coach, but really I'm probably more of a mentor. But a lot of what I work on with clients is very much practical, tactical. When I discovered Byron Katie and the work, it was really sort of eye-opening because it took me into the world much more of sort of mindset coaching, which, I guess any element of coaching is around mindset, but it was much more of that emotional side of things about how we project our thoughts, feelings, and emotions on the world, when really that's what's facing the internal struggle which is going on there. The nice thing about Byron Katie's approaches as well, it's like 4 steps. It's such a simple framework. If I can pick it up, Sandra, like any coach can pick it up, right? So you can pull it into it. I've been able to pull it into kind of the practical, tactical side of what I do from a coaching perspective. And I think, like you say, having those simple tools at your disposal and frameworks to use and sort of draw upon at the right time. I just think a lot of coaches are just quite lazy and a bit arrogant. They think they know it all. They've done it their way for so long. And so they forget that actually you're dealing with a business owner here who needs a broader depth
perspective.
Broader perspective for sure.
What you're saying, I think, is quite important. You remember, KISS, keep it simple, stupid. I always say this to everyone. Life is very simple. It's us that chooses to make it hard. So we've got to always remember this, that we've got to keep it simple. It's like, for me, I'm not a girl that likes loads of toppings on ice creams. I like it simple because life is simple. And when you're talking about the work, when it comes to Byron Katie, I think the first thing every coach and also coachee needs to look at is learning how to forgive themselves, because that's one of the biggest barriers about growth is there's parts of you that you are not willing to allow to breathe because of shame, and you're unwilling to be vulnerable. And I think that level of forgiveness, and in relation to what you're saying about Byron Katie's The Work, I would also add another layer onto that. And also I've got the book here, Colin Tipping.
Yeah, fading in and out there. Oh, there we go. Radical Forgiveness. Yeah.
So if anyone has time to read that as a coach, that probably can help you let go of some of your stuff, because coaches, what you said about ego is very positive, but we use it most of the time in the negative. I am very nervous. I'm very shy. But if you know me face to face, I'm very, jovial. I like to have fun. But if it's something, where I'm doing a lot of professionalism and I have to be in front of a large audience, I'm a human being. I'm very nervous and very shy. But if my ego is saying to me, cancel, that's the negative side. But the positive ego is saying, this is something you're passionate about. You've got a message to give. Spend time and use the platform wisely. So that's the ego that I go with. But when you're a coach and you focus on the level of ego that most people have, to me, again, you're doing your audience a disservice. You're showing them about how fantastic you are, but you're not showing the coachee how fantastic their future can possibly be.